Welcome in, everybody, to this Kansas City Chiefs post-game live stream presented by Bleacher Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Joey Segura. And over the course of the next 30 minutes, we're going to break down the Kansas City Chiefs' first preseason game of the year. Unfortunately, we do not have a victory to talk about, but it really doesn't matter because it's the preseason. But I do think that we have some good key takeaways to talk about. But like I said, the Kansas City Chiefs just dropped this first preseason game at the hands of the New Orleans Saints down in Louisiana. They lost in heartbreaking fashion, if you can call it that, for a preseason game. They lost on a game-winning field goal by the Saints, 26-24. A game that, quite honestly, the Chiefs should have won. They should not have lost this game. They had the ball with, a minute left, and the quarterback at the time, I can't even remember his name, threw an interception. The guy picked it off with one hand. At that point, the Saints had great field position. They just ran the clock down and kicked a field goal as time expired. The Chiefs lost this game, but it's the preseason. It doesn't mean much. We're really going to talk about kind of how the first series was for the offense and the defense, because in my opinion, that's really what matters, as well as some of the guys that we saw in the second and third quarter that really kind of exploded onto the scene and maybe, solidified a roster spot. So, Joey, my first question for you is, what did you take away from this game, even though it was meaningless?
Like you said, it's meaningless, so it's a little tough to judge a preseason game, especially because, in my personal belief, I think a lot of the packages they're putting out there, a lot of the different plays they're running, they're not running any of that in the season. It's very, very basic, bland things, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Spags was not going to show anything special that he plans on using later on, nothing like that. It was very basic packages that he was running. In terms of the offense, I mean, it's preseason, so,
they're not emptying the playbook for the preseason, guys. It's just not going to happen.
No, yeah, exactly. So none of it, you can't judge it too hard. No matter what, you can't really look at this game and make a take on, oh, the defense doesn't look good because they played like 8 snaps of football and then put in bench players. Clyde Edwards-Helaire's usage on the first drive really interested me. Obviously, we still don't have Pacheco back 100% yet, so, that was part of it. But the fact that they went to him the first, 4 or 5 downs of football right there, they went with him every time, and that was surprising to me.
And they used him in multiple different ways. They used him as a running back. They used him as a receiver. And in my opinion, this was almost like the Clyde Edwards-Helaire, show-off game, kind of the Chiefs showing what they have in a guy that, quite frankly, hasn't panned out as a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. But in my opinion, the reason that they wanted to get Clyde so involved in this game is because it boosts his trade stock. I don't really know what Clyde Edwards-Helaire is worth. Definitely nowhere close to a first-round draft pick. But I think that the Chiefs kind of showed some other NFL teams by how much they were using him that, hey, this guy might be available, and here's what he's done recently. Because I think if anybody's coming away from this game and saying that Clyde Edwards-Helaire getting first-team snaps is a really good sign for the future, I just don't think that's the case. I think that the Chiefs wanted to show other teams that he is available and he has something left in the tank. But, I mean, once Pacheco comes back, Deneric Prince, a guy that we saw get some kickoff snaps with the first-team offense, I think that is important to notice that, with Clyde or I guess with Jerick McKinnon and Pacheco and Prince, Clyde's kind of the odd man out. So I think that the reason the Chiefs showcased him so much, in the first offensive series of the game is because he is available for trade. So I do think that, it was good that they got him some reps. Patrick Mahomes, he was good. We didn't really see much of him. He played one series. He went 2 for 2 for 15 yards. One of them was that dump-off pass to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The one thing that I did want to talk about from the first-team offense is the offense got to a 4th and 1 situation, and this was after a Mahomes scramble. And I was under the impression that, you just let Mahomes cook, do a little dump-off pass. They do like a bootleg sometimes where they just get Mahomes out in space and he finds a wide receiver to either the left or the right. Most of the time it's on the right. But we see the Chiefs run this package a lot where they let Blake Bell be the, fake tight end quarterback and just fake sneak it. And I think that obviously stems from the Chiefs' lack of, wanting to allow Mahomes to QB sneak it on 4th and 1. They've got to get over that, because when you take the ball out of your best player's hands, stuff like that's going to happen. And I know that there was like a fumble on the snap and Blake Bell didn't have the best chance right away, but I really hate to see stuff like that happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I am just very, very against taking the ball out of the best player on the planet's hands on a 4th-and-1 scenario. And it, I mean, I'm going to keep saying this because I don't want my takes to get taken in the wrong regard. It's preseason. So this is one of the plays that the Chiefs love to run all year. I mean, this is a play that odds are if it's 4th-and-1 and it's not a crazy meaningful possession, not that every possession doesn't have meaning, but if it's a first quarter 4th-and-1 and they think they can go for it, odds are that's the play they're going to run there. So I understand them wanting to fine tune it and wanting to work on it more in the preseason, but I just hate the premise of it. I keep the ball in Mahomes' hands, or when he's healthy, I'd much rather have Pacheco out of the backfield. To be completely honest with you, I don't love the tight end sneak strategy. To me, I just would rather run the ball with an extremely dominant running back in Pacheco or the best player on the planet with Mahomes.
Well, Blake Bell was a quarterback in college, and I think the mindset is, oh, he QB sneaked in college. He's a big body guy, and he can get you that yard. But I really just think that they have to be more creative, because when the Chiefs lined up on that 4th-and-1, I think everybody knew that they were going to do some sneak of some kind, and it wasn't going to be with Patrick Mahomes. So I think that's kind of the problem, that they have no creativity in short yardage situations. And I think that could come back to bite them, later on in the season, because that's been one of the biggest knocking points on the Chiefs, is that they can't really get it done in short yardage situations. I remember last year, we'd almost rather the Chiefs have like a 3rd and long than a 3rd and short. And that shouldn't be how it is. That's not how football is normally played. So I think watching how they handle situations like that 4th-and-1, although it is preseason, can be important in, maybe showing what they're going to do in the future. But kind of what we talked about to begin the stream, preseason means nothing. This game means nothing. And like you said, they're not going to reveal the offensive playbook to Derek Carr's Saints team in a meaningless game. It's just not going to happen. So maybe that's one of the reasons why, we saw no creativity on that 4th-and-1. They're saving it for the season. But I really do hope that they can kind of fix that, come season time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And kind of shifting towards the defensive side of the ball now, just a little bit. On that first drive, the thing I noticed, and I think is blatantly obvious, is they got no pressure. None. I mean, the Saints just had the O-line had ease stopping that pass rush. And Chris Jones, you said it before you got on the stream, he had to be sitting on his couch just laughing, loving it, because it shows his value. And I think this D-line has the chance to be the best that Mahomes has had since he's been here. I think getting Amenihu is an upgrade over Frank Clark. I think he's younger, more athletic, can get you more pressures than Clark could. Karlaftis, I expect to take another jump. If Chris Jones plays, which I do expect him to play, just not sure if he's going to get the extension or not, you have probably the best defensive tackle in football, and you have Felix coming off on the side too. That's a solid pass rush group right there. But without Chris Jones to distract up the middle, they can't create anything. I mean, they just are not talented enough to create anything. This D-line was constructed to play around Chris Jones. That's why it was put in place. That's why they're doing what they do. So without Chris Jones, it's not the same, and they clearly are going to struggle there.
And I wonder what the move is for the Chiefs front office, because they've kind of already said that we're not going to be able to get anything worked out right now. But if you watch that preseason game and just the lack of pressure that they could force, I think it might have some people in the front office saying, you know what, Chris, we need you and we need you now. Mm-hmm. And so they're just maybe going to have to pay him regardless, because I just think that this team, like you said, they function around Chris Jones in the middle. And when you don't have that guy, I mean, the Chiefs don't have any world beaters at defensive end. They've got some nice pieces, but Chris Jones is the guy that kind of brings everything together. And without that guy, you're going to obviously struggle. But, I'm glad you brought it over the defense, because the defense kind of got cooked. And I know that we just talked about the lack of pressure that they could force, mainly with the first team that we saw. But that secondary unit got cooked. I mean, Trent McDuffie on a touchdown got burned. He just was not tall enough to contest that catch. Justin Reed got lost a couple times. There was just a lot of separation between the Saints wide receivers and RDBs. And that's not something that you want to see. But again, it's preseason, doesn't mean much. I would rather them have these struggles and these growing pains in a meaningless game than in week one. And I do think that, come season time, this stuff's going to get ironed out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And also, I think we have to keep in mind here, And we won a Super Bowl last year. And don't get me wrong, we are, in my opinion, still the best team in football. I don't really care. As long as you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, you're going to be. But this group of defensive backs is very, very young. So they're going to improve. But we have to remember, this is almost an entire group. Aside from Snead, it's practically first and second year players back there. And especially in a game like today, when there's no pressure coming from the D line, all of a sudden Derek Carr has time to just sit back there in the pocket, or Winston does, and they're going to kill you because the play is going to break down and you're going to get gassed and you're going to lose the receivers. And that's just going to happen, especially to a young team with a bad pass rush. It's going to make the defensive back struggle that much more.
But we saw some good DB play. The K-State defensive back that was an undrafted free agent, Awobo, I think his name is. I might be butchering that, but he performed really well. I'm going to try to pronounce his name correctly. Khalef Helasi. Definitely didn't say that right. Khalef Helasi. He had an interception in this game, and Shamari Connor, that draft pick, he had a sack, kind of like a L'Jarius Sneed-esque snap not a snap. He had a sack where he rushed up the middle during a blitz, and it was very, like I said, L'Jarius Sneed-esque, where your DBs can provide pressure. But again, it's not necessarily a good thing that the Chiefs had to sell out with their defensive backs to force pressure in a preseason game. So again, it all kind of comes back to not being able to force pressure in one way or another. But why don't we talk about some of the secondary offensive pieces that exploded onto the scene in this game? Because I think there's a couple guys that really impressed me. The first guy, Richie James. Richie James was really good. There was a There was a series where he was the go-to guy with Blaine Gabbert. He caught that big downfield throw, and it set the Chiefs up in the red zone. He had that touchdown catch later on in the drive where it was much more difficult than it should have been. He had almost to toe tap it in the corner of the end zone because Gabbert couldn't hit him, even though he was wide open. But Richie James was making some plays.
Yeah, he was. And he had the touchdown. And then also there was another play where he had a wide open touchdown. He had just killed that route, and he was wide open in the corner of the end zone. And just Boucheli, horrible throw, horrendous, just completely out of there. He impressed me a lot. You could see the flashes from Prince, I think, just with the style that he runs. I think it's going to fit this offense really well. Not Pacheco-like, because I think they have different body builds, but they do, to me, run a very similar way. I think they are comparable in that regard. And also, we've got to talk about the giant elephant in the room, the guy who we've been talking about for 2 years, Justin Ross. He's showing it, and if he's healthy, I've never had a question whether he can be a starter in the National Football League. You can't watch him, even if it's just training camp, and look at the talent and say, oh, this guy can't play, because he absolutely can. And I think he has the potential to be one of Mahomes' favorite targets. He showed some promise today, getting that receiving touchdown as well. I'm just hoping he can stay healthy, and these preseason games are going to be huge for him, because it's his chance to show that he can do it against other talent that's not just our defensive backs in training camp.
And Justin Ross, the guy that everybody loves, this guy, like you said, he's been hyped up for the past 2 years. And it's really nice to actually see him produce in a preseason game, because while this game might seem meaningless for the guys like Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, this is where players like Justin Ross can make or break a career. This is how someone makes a team or gets enough film out for somebody else to pick them up. So it's really important that you show up and you show out during the preseason games. And that's exactly what Justin Ross did in this game. That receiving touchdown was really nice. The one thing that I will say is Shane Buechele really struggled to get him the ball. There was a couple times where he just kind of had it skip at his feet when he was targeting Justin Ross. And actually, Buechele threw an interception at the end of the first half, and it was because he was forcing that ball to go to Justin Ross. And that's kind of what I hate to see, not on Ross's part, but Buechele was kind of forced to go at some guys that it just wasn't the easy throw. I mean, Rashee Rice looked pretty good, and he had a couple catches that Buechele somehow fit in there, but the throws were just dangerous. And that's the kind of thing that you really can't have. And, we were able to get lucky, and they were able to be completions, but when you play first-string defensive backs in this league, they're going to tear you apart, and you can't complete the same throws that you were able to get away with in this game. So it is kind of interesting to see how Buechele may have hindered some of the wide receivers on this, depth chart from having a breakout game. But, I mean, if we're talking about Justin Ross, he looked good. A guy that I thought also looked really good was Cornell Powell. Cornell Powell, I don't know if he's going to make this team, but if he keeps performing like this, he might not last on the Chiefs practice squad.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Cornell was a guy who, when we drafted him, I thought he was intriguing because we didn't really have a receiver like him, because I do consider him more of a possession receiver, I would say, than anything else. And that doesn't mean he can't fit into other molds and he's not more talented than that, because he is. He's a good wide receiver, but he's a guy who could be deeper down on your depth chart, especially when it comes to later in the season and injuries start piling up, because we don't know what Tony's going to be doing. We don't know if Sky Moore is going to stay healthy and everything, because it's football. You know what I mean? So to have a guy like that deep down in the depth chart that can come and play in, that's big. And in terms of wide receivers being hurt by Bichelle, my issue with that is, I would say, yes, like it hurts them because they might not be able to get the same catches and throws into space. But for the coaching staff, really, it's just about how can this receiver beat the cornerback? Is he getting open into space? Great, because you have the best quarterback on the planet. He's going to make those throws almost every time. So it's really just about the separation that these receivers can get, and I think less about what Bichelle actually gives them. So I think it's more about how the receivers perform personally than it is the result of the play, whether it's an actual catch. Obviously, it's more beneficial if they can get a catch and then have yards after the catch with it. But I think it's more about what they can do.
Of course. And if you're able to perform with Shane Bichelle as quarterback, I think it almost shows you more that, okay, like this guy's a baller. This guy can play. Going over some of the stats from this week 1 preseason game, Shane Bichelle was 11 of 18 for 155 through 2 touchdown passes to 1 interception. Blaine Gabbert, who I think is actually one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, he's getting up there in age, but he was 4 of 8 for 59 yards and threw 1 touchdown. Chris Oladokun, the guy that ended up losing the game for the Kansas City Chiefs, throwing that interception with under a minute to go in the game. He was 5 of 11 for 52 yards. Hadn't heard of this guy before today. Don't think we'll probably hear from him after today. So doesn't really matter. And then Patrick Mahomes, like I said earlier in the live stream, was 2 of 2 for 15, averaging 7.5 yards per throw. Getting to the rushing yards, Deneric Prince had 4 for 14, averaging 3.5 yards on the ground. Clyde had 3 carries for 7 yards. Mahomes had 1 for 5. Obviously, that was that, I think it was 3rd down scramble. And getting to the receiving yards, Nico Ramaggio had 4 receptions for 71 yards. Richie James, the guy that we talked about, had 2 for 44 and 1 touchdown. Cornell Powell, 3 for 42. Rashee Rice had 3 for 30. Rashee Rice, really quickly, he looked really comfortable in this offense for a first-year guy. And I think that's very encouraging because, he might be a guy that has to play right away. So Rashee Rice had 3 for 30. Justin Ross had 2 for 29. Kakoa Crawford had 2 for 27, including that touchdown catch from Shane Bichelle. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 2 receptions for 15. So you're kind of seeing a bunch of different guys get involved. Some of the main guys that we talked about, like Richie James, Cornell Powell, Rashee Rice, and Justin Ross, I think those are the guys to really watch next week, because I think that, a couple of those guys are going to make the team and a couple of those guys are going to go to the practice squad. So it'll be fun to watch, where those guys fit in.
And kind of going back to the Rashee Rice take you had, I completely agree. And I would say, too, I know a lot of people have talked about this, and it's just a preparation for these rookies. Like, this is what's beneficial about having Andy Reid as your head coach, is training camp is so big for these guys. And I don't know if we always appreciate how much work that goes into there. Andy Reid is such a genius with taking advantage of those days. And I mean, every coach does, but he just works them so well. Like the fact that a rookie Rashee Rice can come in and just look comfortable with the 2nd and 3rd string quarterbacks with Blaine Gabbert and Bichelle, and he didn't even really get anything from Mahomes. So to look comfortable with these guys who, let's face it, are below average quarterbacks, not to hate, that's just the way it is. He was great. And that's all you can expect from him. And your job's so much easier with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback and behind that O-line. It's just so easy. And especially with Travis Kelce to have to help divert attention, I think that's just great for him.
And it's really nice to see that, the wide receivers are coming on as of late, because I think that a lot of Chiefs fans were really concerned that they didn't have a number 1 wide receiver after missing out on DeAndre Hopkins. But, I mean, we're watching a Justin Ross maybe flourish in front of our eyes. Rashee Rice is starting to get comfortable. If those guys can pan out to even be like, above average wide receivers or average wide receivers, Patrick Mahomes is going to elevate those guys, and your wide receiver problem that you thought you had, you're not going to have.
Completely. And also, and this is my personal take with it, I think it's kind of in this offense, I think it's a little bit overblown, needing a true number one. Is it great? Yes, absolutely. You're not going to hear me say it's not more beneficial. But I'd argue that Travis Kelce is a top 3 receiving option in the National Football League. And because he's not a wide receiver, he's not going to get listed on those lists. You have a top 3 receiving option, and then you have, if they stay healthy, another wide receiver room full of solid playmakers with the best quarterback. So that offense is not struggling. So it's not like we have Noah Gray starting at tight end and not Travis Kelce. Let's get it straight. That wide receiver room is really solid. And like you said, we have some of these younger guys that are going to get better. Justin Ross and Cornell Powell, this is a year that they have to take advantage of because this is probably the most wide open this wide receiver room has been in a while and might be for the foreseeable future because I think Brett Veach is looking to get one. Obviously, it's not going to be this upcoming season, but in next offseason, he was in on DeAndre Hopkins. He wanted A.J. Brown last offseason. He's made it clear he wants one, but he's not going to overpay for one because he knows what situation we're in. So to have these young guys and have that opportunity, this is huge for them. And I really do think this is the make or break year for Cornell Powell and Justin Ross.
I think it's so important that, like you said, they take advantage of that situation because it might not be like that, 6 months from now. So definitely those guys, if they can continue to show out during the preseason, they're going to have a real chance to make this roster. And, I kind of want to shift back to the defense because a lot of people are freaking out about how the defense played in that first series of the game. Guys, relax. Everything will be okay. I think that, some of the teams that are really successful during the preseason genuinely suck during the year. The Saints are not going to really be a good football team this year. Now, they might win that division because the division's trash, but I don't think that the Chiefs were necessarily really trying to win this game, obviously, because it's an evaluation game. That's all this game is. And I think that if you take it as that, as what it is, the Chiefs got to evaluate a lot of players, and there's some guys that they know, okay, you got a chance to make this team, and there's other guys that you found out very quickly are not going to be a part of this team's future. And a perfect example of that is the quarterback that threw the ultimately game-losing interception. I wanted to address this comment. Is Shane the real deal? I don't think the real deal is the right way to describe it. I think he's a solid practice squad quarterback. He's a guy that can be a scout team player, but he's never going to amount to anything in the NFL. Okay, he's never going to amount to anything on the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, you got Patrick Mahomes, and Blaine Gabbert's a really good backup to have. Bouchel's just kind of the odd man out. So I don't think that he's the real deal in that sense, but I think that he's a solid player that I don't not want, but he's also just a practice squad player.
Yeah, I think he can be a backup quarterback. I think he does have the potential, and we've seen that. But Andy Reid and Trent Green said it on the broadcast. Andy Reid loves having veteran backups, and it's paid off many times. Matt Moore and Chad Henne played a central role in us getting to those 3 Super Bowls. If you don't have them, I don't think last year Bouchelli is taking you and winning that Jags game. I just don't. So to have a veteran like Blaine Gabbert, and this is a little bit sidetracking with it, but even aside from the fact that he can step in right now and play solid football, he played with the GOAT for 3 years. So now you have another guy, Mahomes, who's in the same quarterback room with Tom Brady. Mahomes can pick his brain. Now I go, okay, what did Tom do here? What would Tom do in these situations? How did he prepare for this and this? And him and Tom have a working relationship already. But I think Bouchelli's still too young, and Andy Reid just doesn't trust him yet like that. And I think there might be a payoff here in a couple of years, maybe after Blaine Gabbert's gone. If he wants to play another year or two, then I could see Andy maybe handing the reins to Bouchelli as the backup then.
I will say, Shane Buechele had a hell of a touchdown throw. He had a almost Mahomes-esque throw where he was able to evade pressure, almost got brought down and was able to throw a touchdown pass to Crawford. Really impressive. I mean, I think a lot of people were like, damn, this guy's kind of crazy. But I do think, again, it was the preseason. It didn't mean much. But it is kind of cool to see, some rare athleticism from Shane Buechele. But getting away from the backup quarterback conversation, before we get out of here, I wanted to ask you, Joey, what was your biggest takeaway from this game? It could be a player, it could be a play, it could be a situation. What are you feeling coming out of this game?
So for me, that's tough. And like we've said 5,000 times so far, it's preseason. So to me, to be bluntly honest, none of this means anything to me. I like it. It means absolutely nothing. In terms of positives, Justin Ross looks like he could be a legitimate National Football League wide receiver, which I was hoping he could. And, we'll see more of him throughout the rest of the preseason. But I think that would be my biggest takeaway. And I've become a victim to the hype train with Justin Ross. Last year, I was not so much. And because I've seen it before, like Darwin Thompson and guys like that, who it was always, this guy's staying out past everybody at camp. And he's
Raiders running back Darwin Thompson, by the way.
Future Raiders Hall of Famer Darwin Thompson. Shout out Darwin and Damian for going to the Raiders. But yeah, I think that's the thing that stood out to me is he can probably continue to compete at this high level if he stays healthy, and hopefully he does, because I think he seems like a great guy and it seems like he has a lot of talent there.
I think that's a really good takeaway. I'm kind of in the same boat, but I think what I saw from this game, it was a short sample size, but I think Richie James is legit. I think that, what he was able to do with Blaine Gabbert was really impressive. And there was kind of a large portion of Chiefs fans that didn't really even think that he could make the team. And I didn't understand that, but I think Richie James solidified a roster spot, certainly by his performance in this game. But I also think that he kind of showed that he could be something with Patrick Mahomes throwing him the football. So I think Richie James is a big bright spot. Justin Ross was really good. Cornell Powell thoroughly surprised me. I was not expecting him to have the game that he did. But honestly, the overarching thing is that the Chiefs still have trouble forcing pressure, and that Chris Jones being out is a really big problem. And I just wonder what they're going to do to fix that, because if Chris Jones isn't back come week 1, yikes. And even if he's not back come week 3 of the preseason, I think we're going to have some major problems and really have to evaluate whether or not he's going to come back. I think he more than likely will, but until he reports, I mean, it just remains speculation. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But, at the end of the day, it's the preseason. I think that we learned a lot about different guys. But I also think that at a certain point, we're just going to have to watch training camp, because there's still a little bit of camp left. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be where we see guys continue to thrive, continue to develop. And those guys are going to be the ones to make this team. So that's really all we have for this Chiefs post-game live stream. The Chiefs dropped week 1 of the preseason to the New Orleans Saints by a final score of 26-24 down in Louisiana. I think that we learned a lot about the Chiefs and that they have a lot more wide receivers than the national media gives us credit for. So until next time, guys, for Michael Darcy and Joey Segura, thank you for listening to this Kansas City Chiefs post-game live stream presented by Bleacher Report.